I just hope it means now fucking Western players will stop picking Neeko. You're all fucking shit at it. Stop doing that. It's mercy, William, mercy. Just stop fucking picking it. You're not good. Just pick some normal shit, you idiot. There's loads of OP shit in mid lane.
Well, I think the Neeko picks, if you've watched, like, there's been a bazillion Neeko games within the LPL, but you get to see how strong this champion can be in terms of deception by watching a lot of these Chinese or Korean players play it, because they're constantly just transforming into their allies, setting up these pick plays, making sure that they keep their allies off the screen, so it really looks like it's a Leona going in and not a Neeko, and by the time she pops her ult, it's way too late. So it's been really fun, and I'm split on how I feel about Neeko, because sometimes I feel that it's too strong to be able to deceive people in this way. But at the same time, it is fun to see the mind games play out on the professional level and have players constantly having to second guess about where the Neeko is and if the engage is coming in.
Yeah, but here's the problem I have, Monty. You're talking about the best League of Legends again. Yeah, it's mega when they play it in the LPL, and the way they'll even pick which ally, which would be an interesting one to be coming at you, and then they trick you, and then suddenly it's like a flank over here, they're coming in. That's all great. My problem is this. This is another one of those areas where I need to revisit that whole thing where, people go like, Koreans aren't just born better. It's like, first of all, I'm not taking that off the table anymore. That's on the table when we're doing the considerations about why Korea is so much better than the West. Like, yeah, I'd like to believe it's just cultural. Mate, I'm getting sick of this. How many fucking things over a 10-year time span, Monty, are we going to watch Westerners just incapable of doing, no matter how little it actually requires to do it? Like, you remember way back in 2014 when the Koreans figured out how you could aggro the dragon so no one ever took any damage and you could just kill the dragon in like a few minutes. Then I saw even the best Western teams like Cloud9 doing it, and they weren't getting it doing right. Like, they were taking aggro and people were getting hit and it was getting reset. And it's like, bro, that's just hitting a dragon with 3 people on your own, no interactions from anything else. Then you have, how about when you had all the shit where it's like no one could do the fucking TP flank properly in season 4, in season 5, in season 6. They never figured out how to do the fucking TP flank in the West. They never ever figured it out. The joke is, Peter Dunn gets to look like he came out of a fucking DeLorean with a Grey Sports Almanac because he can just do double TPs. That makes him look like a genius in the West. He's blowing our minds right now. What is the strange magic he brings to our time? Like, it's fucking crazy, mate. Like, the amount of things. Then how about this angle? How about 1 million Jackson Fiora top lane games that I've watched carry the fuck out of LPL and LCK? Then I go watch it in LCS and LEC, absolutely diddly squat, can't even carry a game. Then you go off all the other fucking champions, mate, it's ridiculous. Like the Nidalee jungle, like how many Rengar jungle, how many fucking just champions cannot be played in the West, like in the East? Like, at this point in time, Monty, people have got to just fucking give it up to the elite Asians. They're just so much better at the game. I mean, that isn't to do with the solo queue. That has nothing to do with what you do. You're just fundamentally worse players. Like, you can't do concepts like I said, like juggle a fucking dragon. Never mind the idea of playing 17 hours a day and it's accepted in Korea. Like, fucking no, it isn't. What are you talking about?
Well, I think this is one of Dom's like pet peeves right now that we've discussed on some of the other shows with Western players playing Annie, is that because you can't set up vision properly as a Western team, you can't get the flanks you need in order to make the proper engages. And you see that difference when it comes to being able to execute pincer maneuvers or being able to threaten the backline by being on a flank without getting yourself killed. And a lot of the Western teams are just running at each other. But the problem, Thorin, is like, you can only play up to your competition. If you are getting by and you're winning all your games by not doing these things, are you ever going to do the things that you need because you're not being challenged in that way? If no one's punishing you for making these mistakes, no one is ever going to learn, right? It's the product of being in a less competitive environment. And the only way to fix that is, in fact, to have these players go and compete in better regions, right? Because that is the way that they are going to improve, because it's going to force them to improve in ways that they would not be forced to as long as they're competing within North America or Europe.
I would agree with you in the general sense. Like, if you ask me what are Westerners, particularly gamers who are young men who are Westerners, going to be like, yeah, they're not going to push themselves, Monty. They're going to go right up to the level of what they're required to do. If they can be the best, they're not going to care that ultimately they're not actually that good. They're just better. Yeah, I agree. The problem I have is if I take it outside of the like royal you, where you're talking generally about everyone, I could answer all your questions there and you'd be wrong on every single one. Like, by the way, if I only played up to the level of my competition, Monty, do you know how far behind esports journalism would be? Like, if I was just doing what I needed to do in 2004 and 2008 and 2000, it'd be nowhere. Like, I don't need to do the shit I do now, mate. Like, I push myself because I want to see how good I can be. Because I know that even though what I've done is this good, there's so much more possible. Like, so to me, I actually do think that is one thing that is whack, is this notion, the G2 example is the best one ever, that every split you win all the scrims and you go, lol. It's like, no, there's no lol. That makes you more pathetic that you're so bad internationally. Here's what I would be doing. If I'm winning scrims that hard, I'm not just only scrimming shit like I normally do in our current meta. I'm going to start setting them challenges like I would set a chess player that I wanted to improve. Things like, let's try like late game scenarios. Let's actually try letting one lane get ahead. And how do we fight back in? What are the correct things we trade? When do we manipulate waves? When do we gamble on a bar? I'd be doing this shit. I would be trying to push the boundaries and the horizons. This is why, in my opinion, the worst part that no one ever talks about the ecosystem in League of Legends, it's not just the league format, which I think sucks, because essentially, if you don't peak for the right couple of weeks in the whole year, your whole year is fucked. Like, you can't do anything. You can't go to Worlds if you're bad for like 3 or 4 weeks out of the whole year. Like, if you get the wrong one, you just don't do it. And then the other thing for me is the coaching angle, Monty. The coaching incentives are so stupid in this game because they play into what you're talking about. Everyone's job who's an LEC or LCS coach is win these 2 games or 3 games this week, depending on what year we're talking about. That's it. It's not about be excellent. It's not about, no, it's if I'm playing Immortals and Dig this week, just beat Immortals and Dig. That's all that matters. Get my job for another week. That's fucking whack. We want to dare people to be great, Monty. I want someone to come in like Reaper did in Cloud9 and go, you know what, give me this project. Give me the project. Give me control over the fucking roster, who I can sub in and out, what drafts. I can even overrule a player. Mate, that's fucking sick. Look, he might not have won all the championships, which is fucking mega compelling time. There's a reason his team went further at Worlds than any other teams, etc. Like, to me, these are the things you want to do. So when you're talking about the bona fide people, I'm talking about Peter Don and Mac and fucking, back in the day, you'd have picked Youngbuck and Dylan Falco. These guys, they should actually be, in my opinion, the equivalent of what a GM is in sports in terms of how long you invest in them. Like, you know this, Monty. You don't in an NFL team get a GM and fire him next year. You give him like 10 years. You go, look, I'm buying it because I think you're the best, or you came up through my org and you know the company, and I'm going to give you a solid 10 years. So by the way, it's the reason why, spoiler, I'll just give you a little hint here. I don't think the real reason those mega old texts from fucking John Gruden came out is because someone just found them now, Monty. That was some fucking dead man's drive shit where someone inside the Raiders was like, oh, he's sort of fucked up the first few years. I don't want 7 more years of this. Release the documents. And then they just fucking they politically maneuvered him out of office, as it were, because that is supposed to be the point in sports. You invest in like a long-term vision. So I would love it if you had a setup like this. Like, if people don't know, by the way, the Peter Dunn one is probably the most criminal one. If people don't know, Peter Dunn is on some like Greg Popovich type shit where even his coaching staffs are all goated. He had Mac under him and fucking Duke, the French guy. He had all these fucking people under him, the Empire guy at Evil Geniuses. Like, the point is, that's the other thing you'd get if you had years and years of someone being in charge of a project. They'd also have whole coaching staffs and they'd have people they groomed in that way to be the next replacement for me on the draft and then this one over here so I can focus on bigger picture thing. Without making it too extended a thing, I actually do think that Western mentality is whack. I think it fucking sucks, dude. I want people to try and be the greatest ever.
I think the problem, Thorin, is that you have to have 5 of those people on the same roster.
Sure.
Right? Like, you have to have 5 incredibly hungry players. And the issue is that with that is that a lot of times you want to keep like a legacy pro player, but they might not have that same hunger anymore. If they like, here's a question. I don't know the answer to this. This is purely a hypothetical, but is Caps the guy who really gives the most fucks about winning anymore after he has won an MSI and he's had such immense success? Or was that because Caps was super hungry with the rest of those players on G2 back in the day, and they managed to assemble this roster of players who were all highly motivated to kind of reach that next level of play? It's a real question. I'm not accusing Caps of being unmotivated, but I do think it might be hard to believe that he is the most hungry given the success that he's had in his career, and is like arguably the greatest Western player of all time at this stage, given what's happened with Perks over the last couple of years. He certainly leveled up in terms of that conversation with additional titles and additional success, right? So it's really tough, I think, to have 5 of those guys on one roster. You know, you normally have 1 or 2 of those guys, and those become standout players. But in a team sport, that's just not sufficient in order to get there. And I think that because there is oftentimes massive churn amongst the Chinese and Korean teams, and you always have them kind of bringing up these rookies. I mean, look what happened with T1 and their recent success. People will joke that they lose the finals, but I mean, they've made every final over the last couple of years. And a lot of that has been riding on Faker's insane, kind of unprecedented in esports longevity, combined with a lot of younger players. So I think it's hard. I agree with your premise. I just think it's hard to get 5 players who are all going to be simultaneously at the same point in their career where they have the hunger to do that grind.
That's why, though, that G2 team was the legendary one, because that was players who've already been the best at their role in their region. Like, a bunch of them have even won championships. So at that point, like, that you have unlocked the next level, which is like, now let's actually play the Koreans and the Chinese like we're as good and potentially win the shit. That's why, in some ways, by the way, one thing I'll never do is, so I'm obviously a big stan, well, I was until recently, of the fucking Vitality super team attempt. I like super teams like that, Monte, because if they ever work, you can do this. You can go for the absolute top. It's why I don't think you should get a break and be like, well, you know, they're all right. It's like, nah, it's win or bust if you're that level of talent. And if you have those players, you absolutely should be like a lock to be in the finals, to be at Worlds, do all these things. So to me, it's why I agree with you. The problem is normal players, to get back to the original point, just aren't as good. So realistically, they're not going to practice the same way. They're not going to have the same ambitions. But that's why if you ever get the ones who've already like sort of had the amazing individual career, the stud ADC in mid lane, you do want to see those players. Like, the problem at the moment is there isn't really a team like that now. Like, maybe G2's sort of like that, but then they've got Yike, who's a rookie still, and then no one still knows. Like, spoiler, I'm just going to say this now since you all fucking overrate the fuck out of this guy in his whole career. I must have missed all those fucking insane fucking international like series that fucking, what's his name, Hans Sama's played. Hasn't he played one against T1 that he lost? Isn't that it? Y'all are talking like fucking, this guy's a wizard or something. Like, what? Like, give me a break. So the problem is I do want to see another team like that one day. It's not going to be Vitality, sadly.
I mean, before the Team Liquid disaster, I would argue that Hans Sama was the best performing player on Rogue at Worlds when they went.
Yeah, because the problem with that sentence is it got about 1,000 times less sexy when you said on Rogue and then said it World. So, you know, up until that, I was like, oh, bloody hell, yeah.
But I think that was one of the reasons why.
You have to understand, they're one of the most in shape people under the age of 60 that work in the DMV. You're like, well, yeah, I mean, fucking again, like, started so well at the end. What was it? What did it mean at the end? You know. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.